Have you ever wondered why your silence can cut deeper than any argument? Not the loud breakup fights, but that void of sound where the avoidant partner hears no apologies, no explanations, only a silent scream echoing inside their mind. When you stop speaking, stop texting, stop answering their hopeful pings, you're not merely withdrawing affection, you're severing the energy line that has kept them standing through countless nights of doubt and loneliness. They can't text back, they can't call. They're left alone, and in that empty space, panic ignites. Their heart races uncontrollably. They lie awake at night, visions of you haunting their dreams, only to wake with a jolt of emptiness. They don't realize that it's the silence itself, not any painful word, that strikes hardest. It forces them to confront how dependent they've become on your frequency. And for the first time, face the question, can I maintain myself when there's no one left to hold me steady? In this video, we'll dive into why does silence trigger more panic in the avoidant than any accusation? What internal mechanisms fire up when their energetic connection is cut? How can you wield silence as a healing balm rather than a weapon? If you've ever witnessed the avoidant's invisible meltdown in your silence, stay tuned until the end to uncover the roots of this panic and how to transform it into the first step toward healing for both of you. The silence from the anxious partner is not a form of punishment, but rather a subtle spiritual ritual that begins the moment they let go of every hope of reaching you. In that instant, not only does a relationship end, but an invisible energetic sequence is set in motion to usher both souls into a mystical inner realm where they must return inward for answers to long-buried secrets. When you stop texting, stop calling, stop inhabiting their every thought, you do more than close the door on physical interaction. You lock away the gateway to the external safety they've unconsciously relied on. And it is precisely this absent presence, quiet yet commanding, that imprints on them the truth that love is not a test of endurance, but a sacred manna that nourishes the soul. Within this ritual, there are no fireworks, no incantations, only an abrupt rupture in vibrational frequency that sends every emotional cell from calm to awe as they hear the inner echoes straining beneath the weight of emptiness. In that moment, silence takes on the hue of an unspoken prayer. It neither accuses nor scolds, but whispers instead, "Turn within." It is a sacred moment when they suddenly realize they can no longer hide, no longer lean on someone else's presence to heal the wounds that have accumulated in every corner of their heart. The avoidant, accustomed to living by the withdraw when too close mechanism and striking the silence key to dodge intimacy, finds themselves disarmed by that very key, forced to unlock the soul's door they had sealed shut. This is not punishment to induce regret, but a silent spiritual ritual guiding them to awaken to the fact that every power they thought they held only existed because there was someone on the other side. And once that someone vanished, the ego they built on manipulation dissolves like mist. In the sudden stillness of their inner landscape, all falsehood is laid bare. Every memory, every anxious pang, every avoidance habit is illuminated like a kaleidoscope reflecting back to consciousness. At this juncture, the ritual serves as a divine invitation. Meet yourself again. They are compelled to witness an unnamed loneliness, to breathe deeply and slowly, to allow emotion to flow through every cell, and to learn to redirect the energy they once drew from the outside inward. In that process, silence transforms from a weapon into wings that lift them into the vast inner sky, where they will unearth the hidden reservoir of love inherent in their purest self-own they had long forgot. When this spiritual ritual truly begins, they have no choice but to face the darkness in order to discover the guiding star, turning the initial panic into the first courageous step on a path of healing and powerful rebirth. Silence is the high art of souls, weary of emotional games. And in that moment, the avoidant truly trembles. When you don't utter a word, don't type a single character, the elaborate power structures they once maintained collapse overnight. Previously, they used silence to test your patience, to turn distance into proof they controlled the situation. But this time, the silence comes from a different frequency, not as manipulation, but because you have chosen to stop playing. And that is the strongest signal. The game is over. In that instant, They cannot interpret this silence as a mere psychological tactic. It transcends all strategies, becoming a powerful spiritual summons compelling them to truly listen to themselves. They start feeling every vibration in their body, racing heartbeats, labored breaths, a profound disorientation where the soothing energy once flowed now abruptly cut. No waiting messages, no missed calls, no typing, notifications, only an expansive void whose every passing second deepens their anxiety. They panic, realizing they have no direction to find you. And even more when they understand that, should they reach out, you would no longer be there to respond. There is no one to guide them, no one to soften the shattered fragments of their emotions. And it is this spiritual emptiness that drives them to question, can I regulate my heart without someone else as an anchor? Once that question echoes within, the avoidant descends into an internal crisis more severe than any before, because it arises not from an argument, but from an absence. They don't erupt in anger or dramatic outbursts. Instead, they sink into a confusing twilight between wakefulness and dreams, where every thought feels heavy and their mind wanders through a labyrinth of memories, promises unsaid, messages unsent, shared moments. Each recollection strikes a chord, prompting them to ask, why can silence be so powerful? Why can a wordless void awaken an entire maze of sleeping emotions? As they sit still into the night, no image on the screen offering hope, they realize silence is not a temporary absence, but a ritual that forces them to face themselves. At that moment, there is no place for avoidance. They must confront hidden shadows, fear of loss, fear of dependence, fear of not being enough. In that silence, they are compelled to ask, what do I truly need? What do I truly want? And do I dare to take responsibility for my soul? This process is not easy, for silence brings no comforting explanation. It leaves only a challenging void. Yet within that challenge, the avoidant has the chance to learn self-healing, to maintain balance, and to create their own inner sanctuary. When they shift from panic to curiosity about themselves, when they stop extinguishing emotions through avoidance, the ritual of silence has fulfilled its highest purpose, birthing an inner dialogue, opening the path to self-discovery, and reconnecting with the true energy of their own being. In that silence, the avoidant has no one left to blame. They are compelled to turn inward, the very place they have long evaded, hiding behind walls of protection built from fear of intimacy and past wounds. Without an external target for their frustration, they suddenly find themselves alone with their own reflection, fragments of buried emotions surfacing in waves. Until now, they fled any inner storm, silencing themselves, withdrawing, shifting their stance so no one could get too close. But now, your silence is not a tactical withdrawal. It is a spiritual summons that demands they face the darkness within. In that inner realm, every excuse they once clung to avoid feeling the childhood scars, the unseen tears, the unspoken loneliness awaits confrontation. They realize that to this point, they mastered running away from pain but never learned to heal it from within. Now, cut off from external support, they must learn to nurture their soul with their own breath, using the stillness they once wielded as a shield. Their racing heartbeat at night becomes a guide through the labyrinth of emotion they have long sidestepped. With each hesitant step on this inner path, they confront the child inside, the solitary child who once cried unseen, yearning for a hand that never reached out. They ask themselves, what made me fear closeness so deeply? And can I learn to open myself to me before opening to others? These simple questions are the keys to unlocking self-healing. They recognize that relinquishing the illusion of control requires cultivating an inner sense of security through self-compassion rather than manipulating another. As they sit quietly, immersed in the stillness, they feel each scar vibrate, each memory tremble, unlocking a deeper awareness. And in that moment, they learn to listen to their true voice, not to alleviate loneliness, but to understand that the only true anchor is within. This process is brutal. There are times they long to return to the old comfort, to reach out for a soothing connection that mends pain instantly. They entertain thoughts of texting again, apologizing, probing for the familiar sense of external safety. Yet, beneath the pang of loneliness lies a stronger pull, the craving for inner autonomy, the freedom to feel whole without relying on any outside source. Each time they resist that urge to flee, they fortify their healing resolve, shattering emotional chains of dependency. They come to see silence not as a tactic against a partner, but as a practice for inner strength, a lesson in patience with the self as they transform suffering into resilience. And then, amid the confusion, emerges a new version of themselves, someone who no longer needs to be understood to exist, who no longer needs to be loved, to feel worthy, but breathes sufficiency from within. This realization marks not an end to the relationship, but the start of self-governance, rebuilding the relationship with their own scars, hopes, and dreams. The initial silence becomes the void that draws them home to their own essence. When they complete this inner rite, they learn not only how to love others, but also how to love themselves with full acceptance of strength and vulnerability, ready to radiate that energy out into the world, freed from any emotional boundaries ever again. And there, the greatest fear is not losing you, but confronting their own self as they realize that their cold exterior, protective walls, and retreat into silence were mere shields hiding the loneliness within. In that utter quiet, the avoidant has no one left to blame. They must walk the thorny path of their inner emotions alone. No external voice to guide their steps. They stand before their own reflection, with all the fragments of buried feelings surfacing in waves. They suddenly see that every time they built distance to avoid discomfort, they were running from themselves, and now they can no longer flee. Their heart tightens, as if each beat demands truth, and every breath whispers, "Live authentically." With no more emotional games, they must ask themselves, who am I without anyone in my life? What do I need to feel free from the fear of rejection? Do I have the courage to face my own shadows? Images of past hurt flash through their minds' broken promises. Lost relationships, unspoken longing, and each memory acts like a splintered mirror reflecting facets of themselves they had forgotten. Yet, within those shards, they find clues to healing. Every crack is a place where light can enter. Every wound is a teacher pointing the way. They remind themselves that truth, no matter how painful, is more precious than any false refuge. Walking this inner path is not easy. They must confront anger, guilt, and the terror of losing control they once clung to. They may falter, tempted to abandon the journey, but amid the turmoil, they stumble upon a revelation. True strength lies not in escaping pain, but in standing through it to transform. They begin to realize that every time they voice their needs, every time they shed tears for their hidden loneliness, they are granting themselves the right to heal. They learn to gift themselves moments of stillness, not to hide, but to truly feel. They breathe into sorrow, allowing the heart to remember its capacity to hope and warmth. And then, as their transformation deepens, they experience a miracle. By bravely facing themselves, they are no longer alone, for they discover their greatest companion, their authentic self, free of labels, free of judgment, simply knowing how to love and be loved. From this place, they emerge from silence with a renewed rhythm, knowing when to pause, when to speak truth, and understanding that silence, at times, is the most precious gift to oneself. With a heart reborn, they not only welcome genuine connections from others, but also radiate healing energy to those in need, embodying the power of self-awareness and compassion. Silence is the soul's ultimate test, and if they dare to listen, it becomes the very threshold of salvation. In the depths of that profound quiet, the avoidant stands before a sacred crossroads. Continue fleeing from shattered emotions, or pause, breathe deeply, and heed the inner summons of their own spirit. As they sink into wordless emptiness, their soul begins to echo with questions of sacred import, questions they never dared to face before. Do I deserve peace? Do I truly understand what love is? Do I have the courage to relinquish control and simply feel? Each question sparkles like a faint light in the darkness, guiding their steps inward. They sense their breathing as a primal drumbeat, calling them back to a spiritual origin once forgotten, a place devoid of power plays or emotional games. composed solely of the soul's unadorned presence. And within this enveloping silence, they learn to forgive themselves for the times they wielded silence as a weapon, for the times they evaded feeling, for the barriers they erected that now crumbled under the weight of their own awareness. This is the miracle of beginnings. They cease to be avoiders and transform into stewards of their own journey, opening their hearts to receive healing. Along this path, they might turn to meditation, attune to the rhythms of their heart, or simply sit still, allowing each thought to pass like clouds, drifting across the expanse of their mind. Every sigh exhaled, every teardrop shed becomes a precious pearl, carrying the energy of release, erasing spiritual scars, and rebuilding faith in the power to love and aught only others but themselves. Silence ceases to be an adversary and becomes a healer, mending the darkest corners of the psyche. As the avoidant listens within, they witness a rebirth, a wave of relief washing through them, a flicker of hope igniting previously shadowed recesses. They gradually realize salvation doesn't come from without, doesn't hinge on an embrace or an apology, but springs from inner rebirth, from the capacity to understand and accept every facet's strengths and vulnerabilities alike within themselves. And then, in the very silence that once terrified them, they find their truest voice whispering, "I am no longer alone. I am whole. I can move forward." In that moment, they stop running, shed the protective armor of control, and face the light within, where true salvation begins and a freer version of the soul is born. And that is the journey of silence, not a punishment, but a ritual of awakening that carries the avoidant from panic to salvation. When the wordless void teaches them to listen to their own voice, they learn to release false power, release fear, and discover the well of love within themselves. They no longer flee. They stand courageously in the dark to step into the light. If you're experiencing silence with an avoidant partner, don't panic or force their return. Consider it a gift, a sacred space for both of you to heal. Grant them time and grant yourself patience, for in the end, silence will guide you back to yourselves. Thank you for staying until the end. If this video offered you fresh perspectives, please subscribe, like, and share to spread this healing message, and leave a comment below. What have you learned from the power of silence?